Very good Elevate everyone. I wish you all safe from COVID and can enjoy this event, although we must postpone the pleasure to see each other and discuss face to face. Despite this, I hope I will still be able to transmit my current enthusiasm for the solutions introduced by Appeon over the last year. And in particular, the new Power Builder 2019 C# Web API opens a handful of new possibilities. Since more than a year now, Appeon has told us many times to migrate the business logic to the server side with a new REST API, and then be free to use the UI framework of choice. Therefore, I took the message, and this contribution is a step-by-step design of a modern UI using JavaScript frameworks for calling REST API. There are many words in this title. You will in fact learn step by step how to design a modern single-page application using .NET DataStore and a JavaScript framework. It will be about an hour and a half tutorial. I will demonstrate how to implement a demo application based on the well-known SQL Anywhere Power Builder demo database with employees and departments, with a plugin-free and cross-platform user interface built in Vue.JS and Backend REST API built in SnapDevelop. The usual disclaimer in the presentations from the conference, and now the session agenda. The goal today is to implement a modern, good-looking, fresh, cross-platform UI for your app. So let me show how I solved this problem at the companies where I've been asked to build a fulfilling, gratifying user experience, because you want your customers to receive the unprecedented amount of emotions while using your application. I will do that showing the front end of an application built this year on top of REST API from PB Data Window and Power Builder and Vue. Then I will turn to the gist of the presentation, a step-by-step tutorial for refactor part of the Power Builder demo application with setup and use of the UI framework and related toolchain. They are Vue.js, Node.js, Visual Studio Code, and Quasar. Of course, I will motivate why I've chosen these technologies among many that there exist today for building modern frontends. And finally, conclusions based on my professional achievement in this 2020 spent largely at home, but with probably more time to integrate Power Builder, SnapDevelop, and as I said, Vue.js. Talk about me for a very little bit. I'm a Power Server enthusiast, first of all, leading countless of migration projects from client-server Power Builder to web, iOS, and Android architectures. Of course, I've used Power Builder from the previous millennium. I am Appeon MVP. I have also spent my recent past fairly busy with a PhD in machine learning applied to big data ecosystem, which was full of insights, since today everything around is based on automatic learning from massive amount of data, where traditional rule-based algorithms are not applicable anymore. So exciting future ahead. But this year, I was forced by the UI expectation from customers to make my big step into front-end development framework, and Vue.js has been my choice. If you like what I will demonstrate in this tutorial, please contact me for any kind of support in your project. As I said, in our Power Builder project, we are more and more asked to move to a three-tier architectural design that decouples presentation layer, business layer, and database layer. The business layer on the right side typically exposes its API for other applications, and of course, for the remote presentation layer. There you should find the REST API, for which we now certainly have a few strings to our bow with Power Builder and SnapDevelop IDEs, where we can leverage the .NET DataStore so that the technology shift from Power Builder data window and PowerScript to C# REST API is simplified by the automatic scaffolding and conversion tools in the IDE. In addition, you can use SnapObjects library for fast and effective object relation mapping integration for .NET. But of course, and this is the server side, but of course there is the missing piece due to the traditional Power Builder or Power Server UI that are maybe not what your customers expect. If API is for programmers who interact with it behind the scenes to make the software functional, the UI is for humans who interact with the face of the software. The good thing is that the user interface of a web or mobile app can be redeveloped or modernized without affecting the underlying functionality, the underlying functional business, and data access logic underneath. This tier on the left side is often built on web technologies such as HTML5, JavaScript, Cascade style sheet using popular web development frameworks, and it communicates with the server-side layers through API calls. So a modern user interface and user experience increases usability. It increases the task success rates and efficiency of the application. It increases clarity of the application with the design as clear as possible so that users could not get confused. It creates delight. It maximizes user satisfaction when using the application, and it improves familiarity. A visual design which is familiar to the users builds user trust and interest in the product. So why I have chosen Vue.JS? First of all, what is Vue? It's an open source front-end JavaScript framework for building user interface and single-page application. It is powered by Quasar, a material design tool full front-end stack. Quasar was created by Google, and in few words, it is the most popular design system to build high-quality, digital, beautiful experiences. It has a very fast learning curve, probably the fastest learning curve among all the JavaScript frameworks like React, like Angular, etc. It has arguably the fastest time to prototype and fastest time to market. It provides tons of documentations and very good examples, and it has a very large and active community. As Angular and React are common words, it's difficult to grasp their popularity from Google Trend. Though a good proxy for their popularity, and in order to compare the three, Vue, React, and Angular, is the number of stars that their GitHub repositories get. You see here in the plot a sudden shift in the number of stars of Vue occurred in middle 2016, and recently Vue has been up there with React among the most popular framework, and in 2018 it has even surpassed the competitors. So it is time for a quick demo of a UI that I've created with Vue.js and Quasar for an application whose backend is fully implemented with REST API built in SnapDevelop. This is a product that is in beta version, few cosmetics left before rollout. However, I don't want to describe the business functionality, but rather show you how the user interface looks like, the animation, and the native effects. So there is a login based on a JWT token. When user is authenticated, the left side menu shows the options, which is already available, although not everything may be translated yet. It is English now, but I can switch to Italian from the profile icon here in top right. You see. Then you can save, you get the green notification that pops up. You see how the components, the headers bar, the left sidebar, and the central canvas are nicely separated, and the animations and hovering effect all over. The UI is very fluid, so you can collapse, you can expand, hamburger menu, you can switch between windows. This is what you expect from a modern user interface. The UI is very, very fluid. Even controls like like a calendar or like the cancel icon have their own animations. Let me click somewhere else. In fact, for instance, a data list. with built-in sorting and filtering functionalities. And I have a nice multi-selection here field where you click on possible choice. In this pop-up, you can see, for example, a nice multi-selection field. So you can just disable some options, and you see they are represented by these elliptical buttons. We go somewhere else. I can save notification, as I said. Let's go to these options. Here you have an example of nested grid. You can see how nice is the collapse or expand of the master detail information. And of course, there are also buttons to add new rows with pop-ups and animations. When I switch to iPhone, needless to say, the UI adapts automatically with 0 line of code on different screens. I can show it in foreground, in landscape or portrait. Here I have my iPhone, where automatically the left side menu overlays the page because the space is smaller and therefore it's more precious. And you see that the windows shown before just resize vertically or horizontally with very, very fluid user interface. So documents. So for example, a journal and additional information. And even the save button, for example, is represented by a small icon instead of a large button here. You can bundle the application as a native app if you want, or compile as a native Windows executable or macOS DMG or a Linux binary. So plenty of opportunities. Back to the presentation. This is in fact what we will build in the tutorial, a modern UI that displays the employee's information returned by the REST API. With you know, the hamburger menu up here, collapsible left sidebar that extends and overlays when you hover the mouse on an icon. Then the master detail list featuring built-in sorting and filtering, as well as client-side paging, automatic padding, chips for showing recent screens and quickly move among them, toolbar. Same application becomes a native macOS. You see top left just a standard macOS icons, or just a web API usable from a smartphone. But you can also package as iOS or Android native app. Hands-on then, get ready for a step-by-step tutorial where I will teach you how to build this kind of user interface. I will start from Power Builder. And I have my Power Builder demo database with the usual department, customer, employee table. So I'll just create an empty workspace because my approach is to create first a data object, and then from the data object generate the C# data model and a scaffold service and controller. So let's create just this pb demo, which will contain a pb demo workspace. Of course, I need the target, even though I just want to have a data object. So we go through the usual Power Builder startup. Now, data window, tabular is fine, SQL select. Let's take the employee. Let's take the employee with, I would say, the entire list. next, and my job is done. That is the employee. I save it, I close Power Builder. Now I open SnapDevelop. And I'm going to create a REST API project, ASP.NET Core Web API. Basic is fine. I'll select the very same folder, ppdemo. Yeah, basic template. Let's get rid of the controller, we don't need it. Give SnapDevelop a couple of seconds for the startup. When it is done, we just delete this controller folder, reattach our Builder workspace, because from this workspace I want to select the employee data objects, because from this data object I want to just create the C# model. So that's selected. I'll change the name of the C# model in something which is more C# oriented, and let's generate it. I'll take my SQL Anywhere database where the table is stored, and everything will be stored into the models subfolders as usual. It's created. Now, from the models, I'm ready to scaffold both service and controller. I will select the AnyClient template so I can generate services that perform both Power Builder style data store operations and standard C# operations on data store models. I need data context. That's an ASA database. Okay. Just keep the default. Good to go. Generate. I will inject the data context. I'll inject the service to leverage the dependency injection, and I have my controller that is in fact ready. Let's just test it quickly. Data is coming. Good. Let me just by default specify different port number, which I can use from my UI development framework. And when I test it, I will use just API employee. And in fact, in the controller, I just want to have plain RESTful service. So run. Just give some time, it's coming. There you go. Okay, service REST API ready.
Now that we have our backend up and running, let's see how to implement a modern frontend. Of course, the ultimate goal is to have something that is cross-browser and cross-platform, that is pure HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, namely the markup, the code, and the style. Something which doesn't need any plugin. And why not also possibly package the web project as a native desktop app or a mobile application reusing the same code. First of all, there exists plenty of JavaScript frameworks, and this session is not aiming at explaining the whistle and bells of any of these. I will just pick up one because, of course, I found it better suits my needs, and I have now some experience which I will be happy to pass on to some of you and support whoever is in the need of building a web app which has a modern user experience, which is plugin free and cross-platform. Keep in mind, this is relatively easy to do because SnapDevelop ID generates REST API from, for example, a data window. And as it always been for Power BI developers, we are still able to control the database and manage the database efficiently across the network using the latest HTTP standards. However, the fresh user experience may play an important role in some projects, and that's why we are here. SnapDevelop provides state-of-the-art .NET Core implementation of REST API, which gives you absolutely freedom in adopting your favorite UI framework. In fact, the Appeon message has been, over the last year, use SnapDevelop to deploy your business logic to backend as a .NET Core based REST API, but feel free to build up your UI with the framework of your choice. So just Google around and you will find plenty of cool frameworks for building modern web application, single page application, progressive web application. Top 10 front-end framework 2020. Here we go. You see the top list of the most famous one in chronological order of appearance: AngularJS, maintained by Google, then React by Facebook, which is, as we speak, the most popular, or Vue.JS, that has gained a lot of attention recently. It is maintained by team members and various companies such as Netlify and NetGuru. So today I will pick up one. I will pick up Vue.js because it is my personal opinion. It offers a very fast implementation, and being the newest, as it usually happens in this situation, who comes later usually fixes shortcomings from whom is already on the market. So if you have no whatsoever experience with modern UI, material design, etc., Vue.js is a very good framework with a very quick learning curve. Let's begin with the front end for our REST API. Only pre-requirements are, first of all, a good development environment. Visual Studio Code, I think, is the best option as it comes with IntelliSense, Git support, syntax highlighting, etc. So you type Visual Studio Code, you download and run it. It is a cross-platform development environment. You can run it on Mac OS, on Linux, on Windows. And second of all, you need Node.js. So you go to nodejs.org, download and install it. Node.js is an open source, cross-platform also, JavaScript runtime environment. So if I made there a comparison for your understanding, Visual Studio Code is your SnapDevelop, while Node.js is your .NET Core. Although in principle that's enough to start, I really want to go for the fastest track, so you can just get in and write. Therefore, let me introduce you Vue.js. It is a web framework based on components for building UI. Vue.js comes with a CLI, and according to the website, it provides standard tooling for Vue.js development. That means the ability to quickly scaffold a new project. Same as service and controller scaffolding in SnapDevelop. But here we are scaffolding the front end, not the back end. But how about graphic components and their organization. The foundation of every front-end framework is a UI components library. So everything the web page is built on, buttons, input bars, and whatever we can dream on. Modern applications require really the most appealing, crispy, good-looking, and fast-performance user experience solutions. And material design represents a pretty good base of UI library. It is maintained by Google. No matter if you believe in that or you think it's bullshit, point is today it looks good and makes good impression. And the large majority of web and hybrid mobile applications are based on it. So how do you include material design in Vue.js applications? Here it comes Quasar. Quasar is the front-end framework with Vue.js components for responsive website, progressive web app, server-side rendering, mobile, and desktop. It gives you out-of-the-box material design library with many UI components dedicated to Vue. In Quasar, you can find hundreds of ready-to-use components, and you just need to copy-paste them into your front-end project. So it is via the Vue.js CLI that Quasar can scaffold the project from template. We will see that, and once done, just use the Quasar CLI. The Quasar CLI will be our everyday tool because other than the initial Vue init command for building the Quasar template project, there is no connection between the Vue CLI and Quasar CLI. Quasar CLI is all that we need. Let's then run Visual Studio Code. So you can run it from any operating systems. It comes with a terminal window from which you can access the CLI of the development framework, the Vue CLI and the Quasar CLI too. I have macOS here and I get the default shell. If you use Windows, you will get the standard CMD.exe up to Windows 7. Otherwise, all modern Windows version will provide you directly PowerShell because it is already built in .NET and you have there a powerful toolset. Now, just have Quasar CLI installed by running npm install Quasar CLI. npm is the standard package manager for JavaScript. It has the same role as NuGet in SnapDevelop or Visual Studio projects. In fact, NuGet is the standard package manager for .NET, while npm is the default for JavaScript. Although sometimes in 2016, Google and Facebook created Yarn to replace npm because npm is now managed by a private company. So this command is going to download all tools and libraries for us. I already have it installed, so no need to wait for download. Let's move on. When installation is completed, we are ready to create the Vue Quasar project. So just cd to your folder of convenience. Here in temp and run the command Quasar create, for example, pb demo, Power Builder demo. It is the same as .NET new command, which creates a new .NET project configuration file or solution based on the specified template. In fact, we are now asked for a number of options for the projects. First of all, the project name, just a short internal usage for the developer. So pbdemo is fine. And then the product name, Power Builder Demo App. Description, Quasar project to call Appeon SnapDevelop REST API. Plus, we start with a number of options. Okay, the first one is the cascade style sheet preprocessor. A preprocessor scripting language that is compiled into CSS, so you can use variables and functions also here. We just keep the default. And then the next question, leave the default auto import, which is automatic import of components whenever you declare them in the project. Then we have the slint. Linting is static code analysis tool to check how our code adheres to standards, right? And then the package manager, we just keep the default npm because I already have installed, otherwise just go for yarn. And so it will prepare the skeleton of the project in a few seconds. Today we are used to this quick start when CLI or IDE like SnapDevelop and Visual Studio connect a repository via package manager and download the libs they need and then generates the project source tree. So almost done. We can open now the folder. We go here to this pbdemo folder. So what we get at the end, we get the source tree of our project under the source folder, which contains a number of subfolders like assets that contains external components injected as JavaScript code, boot with plugins initialized during the application initialization, and then we have components, a folder where components are organized, and CSS for the template, then layout with the main layout that we will go through in a few seconds. Normally you have very few layout in your project, like a dashboard, because it always contains the same layout for all the screens that you are going to present. While you have multiple pages, still components, but just whole screens that you apply to a given layout. And then the router, very important, it holds the links between screens, usually in a form of array of paths and URL. So back to the terminal and just run Quasar dev. Behind the scene, this command will start a server written in Node.js that is going to run the application. So the default web browser will display the initial version of our application. This is already a running project with the sidebar, the header bar, and the main screen. And you see it's running on my local host port 8080. Let's now take a closer look at the default layout, which is defined by the main layout Vue file. Files with .vue extension build up the foundation of the framework, as they represent a single UI component defined by three things: the markup on top, or template, then the code, which is included by the script tag, and if any, at the end, the style sheet. So main layout view has markup for the header, for a drawer, and for a page container. You can see a queue layout component. All Quasar's component starts by queue that includes the header with toolbar, and then the drawer, the sidebar, and a central body here, which is the where at each time we can show the content of a given page. So main layout contains potentially several pages. When you navigate, the content in the central body is replaced by routes defined in the route.js file. So this is pure JavaScript. The development web server provided by Quasar has auto mode and auto reloading. For instance, I can change the title in the main layout view to pbdemo. Instead of a Quasar app, I would just write pbdemo app and save. The application is redeployed and you can see right off the change, pbdemo. More about main layout. Notice here the symbol add that triggers an event from template to script, in this case to hide or show the sidebar depending on the Boolean value of this left drawer open variable. But the view model that you can find here in the QDrawer tag is a directive, is an example of the reactive approach of Vue. It's not like regular imperative programming where I test a given Boolean variable. If it is true, then open the drawer. If it's false, then close. With the view model directive, everything depending on the variable will be refreshed. It is the framework that guarantees the template is refreshed. I declare an intent and the framework reacts. And finally, the QList markup contains an essential link component that is just a name, which is based on this v-for directive to render a list of items based on an array. It binds to an ID, the key, the link, the corresponding link. So the scripting part here is enclosed in the script tags, and it imports the essential link component, declare the component status variable, the link data array that is returned to the template here at the end. So the template gets the essential link variable, and via the v-for is able to display all these URL that you have on the sidebar. Now that we know how the main layout view file is organized, we can modify it and prepare our pbdemo application, which can consume the REST API.
Let's define once for all the layout. Quasar offers a layout builder. So just go to Quasar Dev, documentation, search for layout builder, scroll a little bit down, layout builder. Here you can enable or disable parts of the layout. You see an example with a pretty common user interface that you can build with Quasar. You have the header bar on top with the hamburger menu to collapse or expand the drawer. The drawer is the main menu. You can also have a drawer on the right side with same principle for the hamburger menu, and then in the center you have the main canvas. Here it's the workspace for our single page application. You can even add a navigation bar, and at the bottom you have the usual footer. All these components are called QHeader, QFooter, QDrawer because they are Quasar components. So I don't want a user interface so complex. So I will keep the header. I don't need the footer. I like the left side drawer. I don't need the right one. and I will also get rid of the navigation bar. Next, you can continue, and here you have also a preview of how the several components will fit into the layout. Quasar uses a string of 3 triplets of letters with initial to left or right, header, footer, in order to change the behavior. For example, if you have a drawer bar which starts from the very top, you will use for the first part of the screen L instead of H. I prefer usually to have the header bar all the way from top left to top right. So I will change L to H. This is to say that in the end you can export the layout. You will see what is the syntax, and you will see here the 3 triplets of letters that I was telling you. So the entire layout is defined by this string. And then in the template part of the layout, you have a queue header and a queue drawer, as we have already seen in our main layout. Okay, same queue header and queue drawer. So the only change that I want to do for the moment is to take this string, top one, and replace the string in my layout definition. So save, and I can see the application is deployed again, and it is refreshed. So now the header goes all the way from top left to top right. Something briefly about colors. Quasar uses colors themes to define not just individual colors for classes or components, but even a family. So if you go to CSS Quasar variable style, you will find a single point for changing the 3 dominant colors. Then Quasar supports natively the dark mode, and finally the 4 colors for the alerts, for the notifications, whether a message is positive, negative, info or warning. So green, usual red, cyan, and yellow. The nice thing is Quasar has also a color, a themes builder. So when just go to dev and look for, I think it's identity, yes, theme builder. There you go. You see that in this page we have a preview of all the colors that we said before. If, for example, you want to change the main colors, the main tone of the application from blue to let's say red, the only thing that you need to do is pick up the right colors, then export, and we are using stylus. Just copy paste this new definition to our project. So here I will replace this, save, the application is deployed, and you will see that you will get the red. Of course, here we don't have buttons for the moment, but if you have buttons, also the buttons will have this red theme. Okay, let's revert now the changes. Just put what I had before. Right, and now it's time to get rid of these links, because in my application I don't want these menu items, but I would rather include a menu item for the employees, another one for the departments, and maybe a master detail screen. So for that I need to change the queue list component. If you remember, in the main layout I have indeed a queue list, okay, and then of course an essential link for looping over all the available links. As usual, we start from the Quasar doc. We just look for the queue list component API, and if you scroll down, you will see that the number of possibilities are really is really infinite. So you can have a basic queue list or dark background, dense, and so on, so forth, with pictures, icon, and multi-line, etc., etc. Let me just start with the basic one. Documentation provides you every time the preview of the source. So for example, if you like the basic, you can just click on this icon and get the source that you need to copy paste into our layout. Okay, you can copy from here. Otherwise, you can use CodePen. That's a nice feature. You can test the template right from this environment. So down here you have the preview. Let's say we want to, I don't know, do some optimizations, like the queue list should also be dense in order to have a more compact visualization, and why not add some padding in order to have some little space after the components that you may have on top, let's say the header or the component that follows after the last line. Okay, when you're good to go, you just copy paste the syntax. Now I want to move the drawer items in a dedicated component. So I don't want to keep this part here in the main layout, but I would rather like to have the drawer itself and the list of links in a dedicated component, so the maintenance of main layout file is easier. By the way, I can also get rid of this queue item label, which correspond to this gray little title that normally is not necessary. So just do that immediately. We can get rid of that. Save. Okay, it's better this way. And and now it's time to create, for example, a Vue file called sidebar, okay, that uses the essential links or our menu items to connect to employees and departments from the REST API. Quasar offers shortcuts from the CLI, from the command line interface. You don't need to create from scratch a Vue file. You can use some shortcuts via the Quasar new command in order to do scaffolding of a given object. And if you check the help, you can have 4 or 5 possibilities. You can do automatic scaffolding of a page component, of a layout component, the component itself, boot or store that we will see later. So, and there is no need for adding the Vue extension. So I will just run Quasar new, and I need a component, so C, and then let's call it sidebar. The nice thing is this file is already available in my component folder next to the essential link, and if I open it up, it's already it already comes with a skeleton. In the sidebar file, I find already a template, but I will just copy from the main layout the queue list inside this template, replacing this div. So let me take queue list from here. And of course, I also need the script part, importing the essential link. For the moment, we will keep the list, the array of URL, and in the end, declare the components. It's not enough to import the components, we also need to declare it. So let's go to sidebar, paste, I'll do some change here. That we don't need, of course, it's just essential links. And we change also the name of this component. That's not compulsory, but if you don't specify a name, Vue will just take the same as the Vue file. Okay, this is our sidebar that contains the essential link components, which will loop through the array of essential links. Last but not least, I still need to do some little fixes in the main layout. You see that DSLint is reporting 3 errors. So let's go to main layout. Of course, it needs to use in the code drawer our sidebar component. So I will import it down here. And I don't need anymore this list of URL. You can also get rid of the Quasar version from the header. And finally, all is correct. No error anymore. So now the sidebar has my status here with all links and in its template essential link which loops and generates the queue list component that is the content of the drawer menu. Just save, and of course the application is still running, but we have moved the sidebar components out from the main layout. Let's continue and see how many variants of drawer menu are available. So I go to the documentation, type drawer, and by scrolling down, you can see you have basic drawer menu, seamless menu. You can also see a preview, and usually it's very simple. Just view the source code and copy paste the relevant attributes for the queue drawer component. And with pictures, mini mode, or for example with overlay, which is not going to move the workspace to the right, but it expands on top. So the drawer normally just shows the icon, and whenever you hover the mouse on top of the icons, you will get the descriptions. So I think that can be a good test. Let's have a look how it works. We just copy these 4 attributes in our drawer menu. And so just past here. And this is why we moved the list outside in the sidebar file, because we have now a structure very clean where the container, the queue drawer has a content, the sidebar, and the content that can be anything outside the scope of this component. In fact, having now all the queue lists in the sidebar, the drawer component and the actual content are clearly decoupled. So we have a flag to minimize the drawer. We have two callbacks, mouse over and mouse out. And one when the mouse is over the menu and when the mouse is out. And the last attribute is the overlay strategy. So now we register the status variable, the mini state. As usual, we do that in the script part. So I will also add mini state true. So I save it. And now if I go over the drawer, you will see that you get the description. As soon as you go out, the description is gone without changing the space of the central page. So I think it's very nice. If you wish, there are also other strategies, and among the others, for example, make the expansion when you click instead of hovering, but that's enough for the drawer. You understood how simple it is to completely change the behavior of the drawer just with few attributes and setting just few variables in the drawer. It is instead worth to spend a few words about the sidebar. On how a single element of the menu is defined. It is a queue list and the container, while the content we know it is named essential list, is name of convenience, and it represents an individual link. So if we open now essential link, it consists of a queue item with two sections, two queue item sections. The first has the queue icon that allows to show an icon, and it is flagged as avatar. Quasar by default uses material design icons, the set of icons developed by Google. And the second section has two labels, two queue item labels component, one for title and one for caption. If you want to know more about the name of the icons, just Google material design icon, and the value of the name attribute here is just the name of the very icon. So for example, if we use Android, that will be just a fixed icon name, and our application will have all menu items with the same icon. While normally this attribute is a variable whose value comes from the icon name in the array. Okay, the array has different name for different icons, one per each menu item. Okay, so let's save it back. It is now time to get rid of the external URLs pointed by this current drawer, because you see they're all links to external web pages, Quasar rather than GitHub's. I want instead replace the links to internal pages of my application. So in a naive implementation, the array of links may go into a configuration file. We just leave, for example, one link to the home. So change caption, icon is home as well, and the link is just a slash. Remaining can be just removed. Okay, save, and I have just the home. It is worth to notice that when I click on home, this is not the behavior that I want, because it opens a new window when I click on the drawer link. So in fact, if we have a look at the essential link component, we can see that the link attribute is mapped to href, which implements a classic external link. So it's like writing a href some link, okay, in standard HTML. So instead of using the essential link component, href, and target, which by the way is blank, we better implement the queue item into the sidebar. So let me take the queue item. I will remove this and I'll just put it here in place of essential link. Now we remove the dependency from essential link. So this one, we don't need the array definition. We don't need to define the components, while we replace the return here with one item that, for example, we call just routes. Then in the template, into the queue item, we can get rid, of course, href, the target, the tag. We need to use a v-for to loop over the route. So route in routes, for the moment, just contain a home. And we add a key to the title, for example, of the route item. Okay, the icon will be, of course, route.icon, and the name is routes.icon, same for title, and we don't need a caption, it's enough, just one line. And at this moment, we can also remove the essential link. So essential link is not needed anymore. Okay, we save. We can also add a new item. Let's call it employees, because here we will put the links to our employees REST API. So for example, that's URL for the moment. There you go. Let's call it group. Okay, and let's also add a nice separator in the queue list. That's a separation line among the drawer items. I like to have it so the reading, I think, is improved. But how the actual page opening and replacement will work, that's up to the Vue router, which is defined into the route.js file. When you click on a link, the client-side router tries to match the path. Here we have just one entry for the root page. And it applies the layout, main layout, to the page that is going to be injected into the central area. So we have a link for root page that is index view. Index view is here, and it is just the logo page. But now the goal is to have a single configuration file to provide both the sidebar and the router with information on how to generate either the visual elements and the links to implement menu navigation and central page replacement and refresh. It's nice to have a JSON because this can come from an API, for example, so that the API configure the menu based on user profile. But for simplicity, I will just use a JavaScript. So let me create a new file that I'm going to call navigation.js. And since we already have the links, I can just take them from the sidebar and just place them here. JSON or JavaScript, that's not big difference. It's just a matter of syntax. So here I need to do some model exports equal this one, and some alignment to correct. And now I can import into sidebar the navigation array. So import navigation from navigation. The file is on the root, and I will return the routes here, which just take its value from navigation. So far we have just moved things outside, but the interesting part is about to begin, because the same configuration file can be used now in Route.js. So let me take this one, copy and paste here, because now the Vue router can bind the URL to components dynamically. So it's just a matter of looping over the navigation list and generate the routes here dynamically. First thing to do is to add a layout and page item in this list. Actually, we don't need the caption anymore. So for the root, I will have the layout, just main layout employees. And let's pretend we have already an employees page. So let's modify the route. Make it dynamic. So initially the routes array will be empty, and we need to fill the routes from the navigation items. So navigation with the for each, for example, for each element will be route, and what we can do is to push each individual element in order to fill the path, and the path will be just the routes dot link, and the component will import layout. Instead of main layout, it will be concatenation of the layouts folder plus the value of route layout plus the Vue extension. So we can use the expansion symbol from JavaScript, or just concatenate the three strings. It's the same. So layout, and then $route dot layout dot view. Children instead will have the path, and components is similarly to layout. It will be pages the route dot page. Yep. Okay. We still need to make a change to sidebar view because the queue item needs an attribute for navigation without changing the current window. It is to equal the value link of our route property. It will use the routes defined into the route.js, and automatically we will have also highlight. As usual, save and refresh the application. Now it's time to call the employees API, and I need a grid, a data grid. So let's go to documentation, and I'm going to use the QTable component. QTable API. This implements a data grid with sorting, with filtering, paging, scrolling, etc., etc. And as usual in the documentation, you can see the API description, the installation examples, and likewise previous components we have used. Also the QTable follows the declarative logic of Vue. So we declare the template first, the template of the component, and then we pass data to display. In this section, defining the columns, there are the property for a single column, for each individual column in a QTable. We see we need the column name, the label, the field to display, if the column is required, which is a bit misleading because it means the column cannot be hidden using the corresponding filter. It is not related to mandatory values. Then the client-side sorting, the format for defining presentation masks, and many more attributes. At the end, there are the styles for the header and the value of that columns. So let's create a new page. I'll just copy paste, for example, this one. Call it employees. Give a name here. And remove the image markup inside the Q page. From the documentation, now it's time to choose a table, for example, just the very basic one. Let's take the code. I will copy the QTable markup and paste here into my Q page. Let me just change here, add the padding attribute in the Q page, which is a container that implements optimization of page rendering. It is best practice to use a Q page as an external component for a page. In here, I don't like to repeat the attribute with the variable name, so let's just call items here, and columns. I will just add the list later, and the row key. And let's give a proper name to the Q page, so that's employees. And remember, the status is now defined by data. So I call the actual data here items, for example, not to be repetitive, because I need to use the data function over here for the status. So it will be data which return items in array and columns. Then I will add a couple of headers inside the column array, 2 headers for the table. So let me open this up, and for example, I use name, the label, that is the first name, and the field from the table, from the JSON actually, the JSON returned by the API. And then I have a second header that is for the name itself. So name, it will be last name, the label, capital case, and the field from the JSON is emp last name. I can also add some properties to the column we have seen before. So let's say align left and just sortable. So I will leverage the built-in sorting functionality. Same here. Okay, fetch data calling the REST API now. Fetching the data from JavaScript has gone historically through a number of, let's say, syntactic sugar to clean up the code and make it more readable. JavaScript is a single-threaded language. We don't have parallelism, but of course we do have concurrency during asynchronous execution. The JavaScript callback for asynchronous call have been the first to cope with concurrency, then the promise construct, where the idea was to call a function that gives immediately a handle that I can then use when the result is ready. It's the same as a buzzer that you get at McDonald's, which rings when your meal is ready. And nowadays, we rather use async and await construct, which is nothing new from implementation point of view, but definitely produces code that is more readable. The Vue component has a certain life cycle that goes through different states. It's like a window in Power Builder that goes through several events, open, activate, etc. So we must call the API when the employees component is already rendered on the page. And this state is called mounted, which we can specify in the script section. So here I will call mounted state async because I'm gonna call the API asynchronously, and I will get the response from the REST API using the fetch function. So async await, that's the constructor. Fetch, I will specify the URL, and the method, we just fetch data, so the method is going to be get standard HTTP get verb. Headers, it's of course necessary to specify the content type. I expect to receive JSON. And that should be okay. The URL, let's define the URL as a const. So let me put it here. So const, let's say fetch employees URL, that is our http://localhost. We have started the API on port 8082/API/employees. Let's take this const and set it here. And the JSON returned by REST API will be taken and assigned to the items properties of our employee status. So these items equal response.js. Nothing is coming. Probably there is an error here. Yes, of course, I forgot to await because this keyword causes JavaScript runtime to pause your code on this line, allowing other code to execute in the meantime until the async function up here has returned the result. Once that's complete, your code continues to execute starting to the next line. So we didn't get any data because if you don't specify await, the call is synchronous and nothing is returned from the REST API. No data yet, so let's have a look at the console. Our service in SnapDevelop. Yes, there is a 404, so page not found. We have probably a typo in the URL. Yep, it's employees without S. So let's correct it. And finally, the data comes. Good. You can see this is a queue table. It comes with built-in functionality for paging, so you can specify how many rows per page. You can sort by just clicking on the header of each column, and you have this other symbol for paging. Now, what I want to do is to organize a little bit better the screen. I want to present a typical master detail canvas, where on the left side you have the list of the employees. On the right side, whenever we click on an employee, we get the detail. It's important to understand that Vue is a reactive framework, so I don't need to retrieve two record sets, one for the master and one for the detail row. Once I have the complete JSON from the REST API containing all employees, I can just fill the details section with just data related to the selected row, using a variable that Vue will fill and refresh as it changes its content. In order to do that, first of all, let's organize the screen. I will split the current Vue component in two parts. So it's time to use, for example, a div class with a getter. A getter is a Quasar class which offers an handy way to space out elements from each other at equal distance. You specify how much should be, for example, the left portion and how big should be the right portion. So let's look for getter column, and we can just take an example here. There you go. Okay, let's take this definition here. So a div element with this getter that will space out at a given distance one left div and one right div. So, copy here. And in our queue page, I'll take then the queue table and will represent the first contents. And then let's have the second div. Just clean up here we don't need this. And call for, or any given number, means how many columns out of overall 12 columns you can reserve for the left panel and for the right panel. So in this case, we will have the left panel with a list of employees that will be half in width of the right panel. Just have something here. Let's close this div and see if anything shows up. Okay, let's add a little padding in between, a large padding, so you will see that the string has some padding before. And then I want to use a queue card, which is also another handy component. Because it allows you to group together contents of a given type. So in our case, the detail for a specific employee. So let's take the card definition. For example, this one with 2 sections. I will place it here. Just remove the style. The first section can be, for example, our details title. Don't need a subtitle. That's the first section. While in the second section, I will add the entire form for displaying the detail of a given employee, and also add a new one with probably a clean and a save button. Yep, it's already taking its form. Let's continue. As we said, we need now a QForm API that is for inserting some data or displaying text boxes and single line edit. I will then take the overall QForm, which consists here of some input fields until the very end. I will just take the entire definition, and I will insert the QForm into the second QCard section. See, it's kind of easy because you can just take everything as it is and just align a little bit better. We will define later the events to trigger when you click or reset, when you save or reset the content of the screen. And this is our form. We don't need the toggle. At the very bottom, we keep the 2 buttons. Let's call it one reset and one save, or better, clear. That will reset everything. While submit instead will just trigger the update operation. So it will build up a JSON string from the data in the detail panel and will just trigger an HTTP post to the REST API. Now what I need is a place where to store the data related to the current employee, to the employee that I've selected. So let me just add here one structure that I can call selected items. And that selected item, initially it's empty, but it will be the structure where I have all information about the current employee, and I will use this information in the queue input components. So here the first will be selected item. We'll use the same name of the JSON, so emp ID. Let's call it ID number, just ID. If you want to specify a hint, when you hover on top of the element, number, no logic for the moment. Then second input is the name. It was last name. And so let's label. Then let's add some more. Name, last name. Okay. Let's add a separator to improve the visualization. And now the trick is to intercept the click on each row of the employee list. The row key will be the ID, and define an event when you click on a given row. For example, fire, an event called employee click. And this employee clicked, we have to define in the methods, the method section. That event will receive the row, the current row, and will populate the selected item just using a very nice JavaScript syntax. So it takes the entire row. This 3-dot expansion will basically take the entire row and fill the selected item structure. Let's fix this up. Here we need a space. Now when I click on a given employee, I will get the details on the right side. And now I'm ready to fire the update. Or for example, we can just use submit to insert a new employee. I will reuse the same panel, the detail panel, and I will use the clear button to clear the current content and submit all information of a new employee to the REST API via a put HTTP method, because it's through the put that you can create a resource in the REST API. Let me first add the code to clear out the current detail panel. So I'll take I click on reset. I'll just run on clear click, for example, which I will add at the end. And here is enough to just say this selection item will be again an empty object. So I have some name, clear, it's gone. It is now time to add a method for posting the new employee personal data to the REST API. And this method, of course, needs to convert data in the HTML form into JSON format. So we already have here non-save click event name that we can add to the list. On save event, and I can create from the personal detail a variable using the JSON stringify method. So I'll take the selected item, I will convert it into a JSON. A good way to understand whether to perform a post or a patch is to check, for example, the ID, the employee ID. Post creates a new resource. Patch instead updates just some columns, while put would force to update the entire resource. So if the employee ID has a value, do a patch, else do a post. That is the idea. If employee.id, here I will add the code to patch, to call the patch REST API, else that will be post, that means create a new row in the database. So I will call the REST API, same structure as before, that is the response of an HTTP fetch. I have already defined a URL, an endpoint for calling the post API. So creates employees URL, which by the way is the same or the fetch, just because we use a RESTful API. What else? Now here I need to specify methods, headers, same as here. Just copy. The method will be post. The headers still content type this way. This time I need to specify body, which is indeed my employee variable. I close the fetch, and when the fetch is completed, I will return the response as a JSON. Of course, that's an asynchronous call. Let me fix here also. The construct is async. Let's try to save now. New employee. So just clear, and let's say I store myself, and I will submit. I should see the total refreshed. That's not the case. Probably we have some constraints in our model. So employee, you see that in the data model from the Power Builder data object, we have inherited some validation checks for the status, which by the way is already set to A for a new row. So the checks apply to salary, because that's to be greater than 0, and also Bene Health, Life, and Daycare. So let's just add this for salary, Bene Health Ints, and Life Ints, and Bene Daycare here. We add thereby a new template for the additional fields. So it's not only last name, first name, and phone, but we need at least 4 more fields, 2, 3, 4, and we said the year of salary, we have this one, okay, we have 4 more fields. So again, let's clear it out. And you see here that the total amount of employees has increased, and we see also the new row as the last one, which means the post to the REST API has worked. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Now just the time for a few conclusions. We have seen how to build modern cross-platform 3-tier application powered by REST API, which you can build from SnapDevelop in just 3 minutes. That's the time that you need for a full-fledged RESTful API. Then we move to Vue.js and Quasar, because in about 1 hour you can build a component-based, beautiful user interface. So think about starting refactoring an attractive Power Builder application. Contact me if you need for jumpstart, training, or turnkey projects where I can support you if necessary in building the REST API with SnapDevelop, and then just build the entire user interface with Vue.js in a limited and predictable amount of man days. Stay connected with the Appeon community. Of course, community.appeon.com is the site where you find discussion. You can post questions and get answers, but also the Appeon social networks. And thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy Elevate.